Hi, this is Ange, and every week I have special guests on this show, and today I am honored to have an extra special guest. His name is Eldon Taylor, and he is a New York Times best-selling author. He also has his own radio show, Provocative Enlightenment. He's a psychologist and interdenominational minister, ordained. He's also a fellow with the American Psychotherapy Association, and he's an international speaker, and I'm so pleased to have you here, Eldon. Thank you so much.
It's indeed my pleasure, Angela. I'm very much looking forward to our conversation today.
Yes, well, if it's any testament to our conversation before the recording, then yes, it's going to be great. So my first question, the one that really struck me, and of course this show is called Dear Angela on Happiness and Success. So the one question I wanted to ask you is, what do you think, or why do you think so many people are unhappy and unfulfilled in life?
I think that's, they're counterfeit to themselves. They're just completely self-alienated. They've been enculturated in such a way that consumption seems to be what drives their life. We just digressed for a second and ask a couple of quick questions. I'm not much on most of what Friedrich Nietzsche has to say, but he does have a couple of questions in his Twilight essay that are really important. One of them is, if you could be the architect of your life, if you could decide, this is the characteristics of my life that I would like. I want to be, outgoing, I want to be charming, I want to be honest, I want to be faithful, whatever. If you could do that, and you sat down and you made a list of all of these characteristics that you would like for yourself, how many of them actually fit who you are? One of the things that we see in today's society is the fact that human beings are a bit of a chameleon. Everything that we want, everything that we dream about, all of the goods that we're going to consume, the automobile that we're going to drive, the briefcase, and so on and so forth, all of these things have been foisted upon us by typically the media, but by our culture for sure.
Yeah.
So when a human being changes their clothes, I have a little ranch out in Spokane, Washington, and if I put my chaps and boots on and start to the barn, I'm very aware that I'm inclined to behave differently than if I have a suit and a tie on and I'm on a college campus. People change just how they dress, and it changes their demeanor. It can change the way they speak, etc.
Yes, absolutely.
We are so easily manipulated by those folks that understand this about us that, look, I could sit you down at a plain table and give you a questionnaire that would scale on one end liberal values and on the other conservative values. And if I put a bottle of hand sanitizer on that table, you will be far more inclined, 30 times more inclined, to respond in conservative than as opposed to liberal, simply by the presence of that hand sanitizer. These primes, as we think of them, the things that surround us, the clothes that we put on, they are so embedded in our psyche that the fact of the matter is we're living out a counterfeit life. There's a great Native American philosopher. His name is Lame Deer. And what Lame Deer says is, he talks about Custer and Little Bighorn, and how the soldiers all died there for what he calls green frog skins, paper money. He explains that, even if they weren't just fighting for their payrolls, they were then fighting for what? The gold in the South Hills, for things that they died for. And what the Indian children did with this paper money, these green frog skins, is they made toys out of them. They made little, buffalo or horses, paper critters that they could, play with in that sense. So here is Lame Deer saying, now, how do you define your life? if I ask you, if we happen to meet somewhere, we're on an airplane or on a bus or just queued in a line in a grocery store, and we happen to exchange a bit of conversation, pretty quick I'm going to say, well, what do you do? And how are you going to define yourself? You're going to say, I'm a carpenter, I'm a plumber, I'm a lawyer, I'm a doctor. You're going to define yourself as one of those cogs in the greater machinery that we think of as money-driven. You're not going to tell me you're a human being. You're not going to tell me you're a God experience walking. You're going to tell me what you do to make money. And so I'm going to ask you, this is lame deer again, I'm going to ask you, is that the life that you would choose, a life that is in pursuit of money? Do you want your life defined by those green frog skins? Well, most people in our society have inadvertently defined themselves in exactly that way. They spend their days in pursuit of money, either for consumption or for basic needs. But, for most Americans, we long ago reached our hierarchy, as Maslow calls it, of basic needs. We're instead now participating in this consumption model as to what we're going to buy next. And we find that today you can run study after study and discover that shopping actually assuages anxiety. People go shopping to fulfill their lives, to fill that boredom, now wait a minute. If you stop and you thought, Angela, what would I do if money didn't matter? Mm-hmm. Every day when I got up this morning, when I walked out, there were 3 moose in my yard. I posted a picture of them on my Facebook page, mommy and 2 twin babies. And, there's just that moment of awe, just that, wow. And you just, now if there are no time constraints, maybe you just sit down and you just enjoy them. You just watch them, They're out in my pasture, my north pasture right now, just sitting down. And my entire staff has been looking, through the office windows, just enjoying them. And I'm not saying word one to them. I don't care that they're not working. The fact of the matter is, we spend too much of our lives burning it away like, Sambo's tiger, just chasing our tail to become somebody else's butter.
Yeah, and something that, like you say, isn't connected with us and who we are authentically. It's all of these things that are based on what we think is expected of us, or like you say, what we think is going to get us ahead. A friend of mine and I had this conversation the other day, and we were referring to people as almost like drones going through daily life and not realizing, they're living in this little box and not realizing what's out there. And then another thing that's been coming up as something with a number of my guests has been the whole idea, like you say, of losing that awe and innocence and zest for life and, that absence of fear that children have just to, be themselves and do things that make them happy. And if we could get back to, we talk about growing older and where we're going there. Well, if we could get back to, that feeling when you're a child, and anybody who has children will feel it, then we'd be a lot better off. Children aren't concerned about the frogs, as you say, which is a nice story, by the way. So, yeah.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, Robert Lang says the condition of alienation is the condition of the normal man, and there is no question about that. Normal, human beings today rarely stop long enough to ask themselves who they are. One of the things that I spend a lot of time, and I know you do too, teaching people is how to become mindful. How to become aware and alert to the thoughts that enter your mind. Billions and billions and billions of dollars. I mean, we're into the trillions now, actually, have been spent understanding how the human condition, how the human psyche can be tweaked and manipulated. And, it isn't just advertisers that do that. I mean, we have politicians that hire social scientists. For example, President Obama, this last election, had what everyone is calling a dream team of social psychologists assembled to choreograph literally every aspect of his campaign, to write word for word what the canvassers would say in person or over the telephone, to use words that work, to use a psychology that appeals to us unconsciously, to pull things like compliance principles. Let me give you a quick example there. Research shows us that, Angela, if I can get you to put a bumper sticker on your car or a little placard in your window supporting a cause, that you are 100 times more likely to put a billboard on your yard a month later. The reason is your necessity for consistency.
Right.
Once you have committed to something, now you have to explain it. You have to be consistent. Well, it goes further than that. We can take 4 automobiles. We can drape a beautiful woman in a bikini across it, and then we'll have men rate the automobiles. Which automobile is the fastest? They'll choose the fastest car, and almost invariably, it will be the one with a woman draped on it. Now, you can bring them back a week later. You can rearrange the same 4 cars and put her on a different car, and they will still choose the car she is on. And when you point out to them that the choice they have made seems to be based on this woman, they'll deny that, and they'll justify it in order to maintain this need for consistency.
Yeah,
what a lot of people don't understand that is critical, and I really wanted to make sure that the point was made in Choices and Illusion, is that more than 90% of the choices that you will make are made in the subconscious. Not only is that the case, not only is the nucleus accumbens literally deciding for you, but an fMRI technician watching the brain lifetime will know what you're going to decide 6 to 10 seconds before you know. And that ought to startle a lot of people. That's what? How's that possible? How does somebody just watching my brain know what I'm going to decide before I know what I'm going to decide? How is that possible? Well, that is in fact what's taking place. And, people that, I think of it in computer terms, GIGO, garbage in, garbage out, people that fill their unconscious, their subconscious, that reservoir, with all the negativity that there is out there in the world, all the no-don'ts that they grew up, you're not smart enough, you're too stupid, you're ugly, no, you can't do that, you're not old enough, and on and on and on and on. All of that, all of the messages from television. And I'll tell you, there's one thing every TV commercial, every radio commercial, every newspaper commercial has in common. And that's this. The message is you're deficient. You're deficient. You're missing something in your life. Look, if your complexion was proper, you wouldn't need this, but it's not, so you do. If your hair color, if your clothing, and on and on and on. So we are inundated with that. And then you add this escalation of violence and sexuality, which systematically desensitizes our threshold of arousal, which means we need more and more of it in order to be aroused so we're not bored. And the next thing you know, you have a hive consciousness walking around in individuals. And I know that you've probably, flown, so as you lift off an airport and you look down over a major city, what you see are all these ants on the sidewalk. And that's exactly how they seem to be behaving.
Yes, exactly. And, you bring up a couple of things that really struck me when I read your book. And for anyone who doesn't know, it's called Choices and Illusions. How did I get where I am, and how do I get where I want to be? And Eldon Taylor's just released an updated version, and it includes a free CD from his Inner Talk program, which is all based on subliminal technology and how that can affect us with positive change. And the one thing that really struck me that I never reflected on that much before was this whole idea of the subliminal messages that impact us on a daily basis. I mean, we've all heard about, the ads and how they're set up and to entice us to buy the product, or like you say, point out some apparent fault that we may have so that we'll want to buy it. But what I didn't realize fully until I read your book was just how widespread it is and how it's included in, political campaigns, and that they actually hire people to develop these messages so that we're influenced. So, I mean, I just wrote a blog post for Blog Action Day on human rights and taking individual responsibility and all of that. And where is our human rights being honored when we're being influenced in our political
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? In our political
I do.
Because, we're supposed to have free, a free vote to choose, right?
Well, I'm totally in your camp, and the bottom line there, Angela, and from reading the book, is I got a training manual, got my hands on an actual training manual, and they describe exactly what they do and why they do it. And, there's an ad that is illustrated showing how they embed all these sexual images and demonic images and thanatos or death dying images and how they have found in their research that the psychology responds to it, and so on and so forth. But when you talk to people, most of them say, well, that's illegal. They can't do that. That's false. There's no such thing as a law that protects you from subliminal information. There is an FCC codification that says a station shall not knowingly broadcast.
Right.
If it does, it may lose its license. But as you said, look, in the Bush-Gore campaign, Bush's people actually took the word rats out of bureaucrats, bolded it and set it over the top of Gore's head. It ran heavily in states like Tennessee, Gore's own state, which he lost, in Florida. And we all know the story about, dangling chads and whatnot in Florida, okay? We know Bush won the election.
Yeah.
Adelphi University replicated that rats ad and ran a good study to see if it would have any influence on voters' trend. And without a doubt, the data was very robust. It most certainly did influence the outcome of the campaign, the outcome of the election, the Gore-Bush outcome. But now here's the thing. Democratic National Committee, they discovered this ad. They knew the ad was there. They went after the Bush people over it. At first, the Bush people denied. Then they admitted that they'd done it. They said it was just kind of, frivolity, just a gag, I should say. Bush himself played with the words, subliminal, and of course everybody laughed at, well, if he can't pronounce the word, obviously, he didn't have anything to do with it, see? So, but the DNC pursued it as far as they could, and at the bottom line it came to this. The station denied having any knowledge that these ads had subliminal content in it. And, of course, if they had no knowledge, well, then there was nothing that could be done about it because there are no laws. There was a case involved the Judas Priest group that took place in Reno, Nevada a few years ago. Two young men listened to the Stained Class album over and over. In the album, in one of the songs, Better by You, Better Than Me, are the lyrics that actually encourage overt suicide. And the subliminal message beneath those lyrics, do it, do it, do it, do it, repeated. So we have two young men, they've had a little bit to drink, and they smoked a joint, and they're listening to this music over and over and over on a Christmas holiday weekend, and they look at one another, and they start chanting, do it, do it, And they take the shotgun and they go to the schoolyard and they do it, okay? Mm-hmm. Now, the reason we know what happened is Belknap killed himself right off the bat, but Vance failed to brace the shotgun, and so it blew the front of his face off, and it took many surgeries and a few years for him to die. Wow. But he was able to tell us what happened in that period of time. And he actually told CBS Records in their discovery about the do-it chanting. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't like, CBS managed the media, and there's no question about that. They were fined by the judge repeatedly for it. They leaked bad information. But the bottom line to this whole thing, and the reason I'm bringing this up, is the judge ruled in this instance when CBS argued that they had First Amendment rights to say whatever they wanted to say, subliminal or otherwise. Judge Whitehead ruled, no, you don't. The fact is the First Amendment protects us against that. That's as close as we have come to any kind of legal ruling. Technically, we have a precedent that says it's a violation of the First Amendment, like calling fire in a theater house, to mess with your mind without you knowing it, But the fact is, whether it's a anti-theft message in a retail store that you walk into, or it's a subliminal message on television, like ran in Denver, Colorado, in a toy commercial, tell mom buy now, or it's what you see in my book, the examples designed to sell you liquor and sin. Well, all of that, including the politician, that technology is there, it's known, it influences the human mind, it primes the way you talk to yourself, and it predisposes your behavior, and the data on that is just too robust to deny today.
Yeah, you really can't deny it, and what really struck me is, because I've been on this personal development, conscious evolution journey for years and years now, and, of course, as I said to you earlier, the longer you go along in it, the more you realize that it's really an ongoing effort to stay in that space and make sure that you stay focused on the present moment and be mindful and use self-reflection on a daily basis and, harness this, energy that we have that connects us all and the universe. And so when I read it, I actually had this feeling of fear and almost like, I don't really want to say dread because it wasn't that strong, but it incited this concern about, okay, so I'm consciously, trying to, have positive messages that are going to transfer into my subconscious, and then unbeknownst to all of us, we have these opposite messages that are being sent out that we can't even recognize that are also permeating our subconscious. So I guess it begs the question of, obviously until this becomes, more globally aware and people start, doing something about it, then how do we avoid having those negative messages or influential messages that we don't want because we want to be able to make our own decisions? How do we kind of shield or protect ourselves from that?
Well, what we have to do is we just have to become conscious.
Right.
That's Progressive Awareness Research is an organization that I've headed now for over 25 years, and I like the name of it, Progressive Awareness. We wake up a little bit at a time. The fact is, when I know, and that was part of the reason that I wrote, Choices and Illusions, when I know how this information predisposes me, how it impacts me, and what its sources are, well, then I have my first cue for defense. Once I understand that that's what goes on, I can begin to protect against it. For example, let's take this little bit. We know one of the studies that I talk about in the book is an oncology study that I ran. Well, we know today that in the presence of an authority, the area of your brain that discriminates turns off, just shuts down. So to use the words of positron emission tomography folks, PET or MRI folks, it turns off. All right.
Right.
Now, what does that mean? Well, that means that in the presence of your doctor, when he says to you, I'm sorry, you're dead, there's nothing I can do, go home and get your things in your affairs in work, whatever order they need to be, what he's really done is hand you out a death sentence because you're failing to discriminate. You're not judging what he's saying the same way you would judge some person that walked up to you or some fellow worker that told you something, okay? If you know that, if you understand that, then you can defend against it.
Right.
I see my own physician, and my physician says to me, well, I think, Eldon, and I say, well, wait a minute. I become aware of he's telling me something. I don't necessarily need to accept that, and that becomes your own countermeasure. When you're aware that there's no such thing as a advert coming at you that is not telling you you're deficient in some way, it changes how you see those advertisements.
Right, right.
We know that television ads sell sickness. There's a classic one that, you remember restless leg syndrome, Angela?
Yes.
There was a drug that was introduced for restless leg syndrome a few years ago, and all of a sudden the media rollout was intense. Everywhere there were commercials appearing multiple times all day long about restless leg syndrome. If you go to the AMA and you look at the, records of or incidents of restless leg syndrome, you'll see that while that ad was on the air, the reported incidents skyrocketed. Now, the ad, gave rather nondescript information about, twinges in the legs and had you ever this or ever that. And most of us have at one time or another experienced the things that they were describing. Yeah. All right, the drug patent expired. The commercials came off of television. Restless leg syndrome incidents decreased and went right back down to where they were hardly heard of. Now, that's not to say that there isn't such a thing. People honestly have it. Is to say that this ad bloated the reports on it. We know that, one of the classic stories, in my view, took place in a school in the Midwest when a school teacher found a 50-gallon drum in the basement that had skull and bones on it. It was leaking, and she touched the fluid. It panicked her. She ran upstairs. She told everybody. She broke out in hives. Suddenly a rash. There was swelling. They rushed her to the hospital. She was sure this was World War II, contaminated, maybe what chemical warfare. A third of the school ended up in that hospital before the evening was over, all manifesting symptoms, real symptoms, rashes, swelling, increased temperature. That's important, real symptoms. What was in the drum? Water. Wow. As soon as it was known it was water, it was like, oh, okay, and everyone was well. The power of the mind is absolutely incredible. A hypnotist can hypnotize you, touch you with a piece of ice, tell you he's burning you, and you will blister. Mm-hmm. It's absolutely incredible. Well, we allow all this information into our minds and we don't protect against it, then what do you think is going to come out? And that's why becoming mindful, choosing what you're going to put into your mind, making the conscious choice. I'm going to listen to this informational radio show. I'm going to listen to Angela's show today on coaching. I'm not going to be watching Days of Your Lives or whatever, serial soap happens to be on TV. Is Days of Your Lives still on TV? I remember that from when my mother watched it. Anyway, whatever. I am going to guard what I put into my head. I am going to protect that. I'm going to use affirmations. I'm going to maybe use subliminal messages. I'm going to do what I can do to prime my beliefs so that from the inside they are consistent with what I am claiming here on the outside I want in my life.
Yeah, yeah. And, for everybody listening, this is amazing, and, you've probably heard me say, wow, quite a few times. It's just because it's so incredibly amazing, and even if you know about these things, the more you read about it, the more you're just in awe about just how much we're affected by all of these things. And that's why it's so important to, like Eldon said, one, become aware so that you can start having things around you, whether it's in your media or whether it's people around you, like we were talking last week on the show, that really foster these positive pathways in your brain, and then by extension transfer over into your subconscious, which is where the real drive for your behavior comes from. I could just talk to you all day, Alden, about all of these things. It's just simply amazing, and you're so knowledgeable, and you have such a breadth of experience. But unfortunately, this show's coming to an end. But for all of those listening, Mr. Taylor is going to be joining me next week on Conscious Evolution Media TV, the Path to Joy and Prosperity show, and we're going to continue talking about these really important topics. I'd like to ask Mr. Taylor his views on individual responsibility, which we covered in last week's TV show, and we'll just get your mind rolling a little bit more on this, and get you thinking about what changes you can make in your life to start, training your brain to pick up on these positive messages rather than these influences that seemingly are outside of your control. So thank you so much, Eldon, for joining me. It's been an honor, and I can't wait to talk to you again.
Great. Indeed, my pleasure, and I look forward to it as well, Angela. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.